I'm Rob Kellogg, and today we're going to talk about lead exposure. Now, in order to become certified in lead abatement or lead removal activities, you must go through an EPA approved program, and that's usually through the state that you're working in. So make sure that if this is what you're doing, that you follow those protocols and make sure that you're using that certification accordingly. But just for an awareness factor, and that's what you're here for, is to make sure you understand where lead really is and what it does is we want you to understand that you're going to get into the construction environment on many applications that could have lead exposable materials. And what are those materials? Well, primarily when we think of lead, we think of paint, and that was what was utilized for many years in the residential environment and industrial and commercial applications. Since the knowledge of the lead exposure potential, residential is no longer approved. And anytime you're working around anybody that's of the elderly persuasion or child age, those lead exposures are extremely hazardous to those individuals in our society. It's no less hazardous to those of us who are in the healthy part of our lives and the productive part of our lives, but we still have a propensity to cause others to be exposed to that by not utilizing good practices. So paint is something we need to look at as usually the primary means. Now, where do we find that? Today, paint is still utilized with lead applications for rust inhibition, weathering, things of that nature, or special applications. So it's still out there, and we need to be aware of that. Well, how do I know if it's lead? Well, you're going to have it tested in order to find that out. So if you are messing with some systems that have been there for several years, especially in the commercial environment, you're removing that paint, especially off of steel, is primarily where you're going to find it to prevent that rusting to happen. Excuse me. So once we identify that paint as lead based, then we make sure that we don't utilize any kind of practices or procedures with that material until we're certified to do so and we're qualified in order to be in that environment. Now, another place that you can find lead is in old plumbing. Anything before 1980 was lead soldered together. So your copper as well as your black iron, your drainage systems, especially down in New Orleans, their waste piping systems down there. Some of them still have some lead lining to them, especially at the connection points. So one of those things we want to look at if you're in a building and you're doing demo and you have to remove the plumbing systems, make sure that when you do that, that you avoid those connections in particular where the joints are. If you're going to remove that and not disturb that, you shouldn't have a problem. But once you start cutting, grinding, manipulating, heating those joints up, that lead will get into the air. So what is lead? Lead is actually a natural metal. You'll find it in the earth. It's pretty much everywhere. There are concentrations of that throughout the United States. And that's where it's actually mined and put into production for commercial use. But for our own purposes, we need to understand that lead is a poison. And once it gets into your body, it kind of stays there for quite a long time. It gets into your blood system either through inhalation, absorption, through your mucous membranes. You can ingest it by eating it, and those are your primary functions of access. So once you have this in your body, it'll stay in your bloodstream until it decides to attach to two particular products of your body, and that's your brains and your bones. And that's where it's going to accumulate. But it can still wander through the body on a red blood cell until it finds one of those two mechanisms and jump off, so to speak. And then that's where it will stay for a long, long time. So the more that you are exposed to it, the more accumulation you're going to have when it comes to that exposure. So we want to minimize that. So what is an acceptable level? Well, it's kind of hard to measure because you can't see it. And in fact, what I have on the board here is that your permissible exposure limit is 50 micrograms per cubic meter. Put that in perspective, you can't see that. It's just not visible. And that's an average over the course of an 8-hour workday. So that's the most you should accumulate on average. So if you're getting into a potential lead environment, there's some protective mechanisms you can take into place, especially if it could be airborne. We want to protect ourselves from that respiratory exposure. In order to do that, you're going to have to use a filter, whether on a mask or if you're qualified to wear a respirator. Make sure that you have a P100 level exposure protection level. Excuse me. A little cold today. So make sure that's a P100 when you do this. By wearing this properly, it should reduce your exposure to a minimum acceptable level. These filters are not going to get 100% of everything, even though it says P100. That only protects the 99.997% of any particulate that might be in the air. So you're going to get a very little bit of exposure, but it's well below the exposure that your body can handle over that time period. So just understand that if you're going to be in that environment, make sure you protect yourself. Ask a lot of questions on how you can protect yourself. What's the task? What's the hazard? And what is your countermeasures? And you should have that guidance. But if you have any questions between then and now, definitely give us a call back here. We can give you some guidance on how to prevent yourself from being exposed unnecessarily when you do your tasks. As always, safety is not a mindset, it's a state of mind. Thanks. Have a good day.